At 6:12 on a Monday morning, my mother emailed me a photograph of herself and my younger brother drinking champagne beside the Tagus River in Lisbon. The subject line said, "Now you know what it feels like to have nothing." Beneath the photograph, she wrote, "Nolan and I took back the $512,000 you were hoarding. Don't waste money chasing us. Enjoy your empty accounts." My brother added one sentence from his own email address. "Try auditing your way out of this, Rachel." They believed they had stolen my savings, escaped to Portugal, and finally taught the selfish daughter a lesson about family. They did not know that $194,000 of the money they moved belonged to 12 families whose homes had been destroyed in a Colorado wildfire. They did not know the account was monitored by a bank, a nonprofit board, an insurance carrier, and 3 people whose entire careers involved finding missing money. They did not know I had saved every manipulative text, every fake vendor invoice, every login from my mother's house, and the voicemail where Nolan laughed and said I would be too embarrassed to report my own family. Most importantly, they did not know that the daughter they had spent 34 years calling cold had finally become too tired to rescue them. 3 months later, at Thanksgiving, my mother placed a printed apology beside my plate and told 26 relatives I could save the family by signing it. The statement said, "I had misunderstood a temporary family loan, overreacted because of work stress, and unfairly stranded my mother and brother overseas." Nolan sat across from me wearing the watch he had purchased with my money. My mother said, "If you refuse, you are proving money has always mattered more to you than blood." I looked at the relatives who had ignored my birthday, cropped me from wedding photographs, and called me selfish whenever Nolan needed another bailout. Then I placed one speaker in the center of the table and played my mother's voice saying, "Once we are in Lisbon, she won't have enough left to fight us. My name is Rachel Bennett. I was 34 years old when my mother and brother emptied every account they could reach, and until that morning, I had built my entire adult life around never becoming financially helpless again." I lived in Lakewood, Colorado, in a 2-bedroom brick bungalow 15 minutes west of Denver. The house had original hardwood floors, a narrow kitchen, a leaking window above the basement stairs, and a backyard that became mostly dirt whenever summer temperatures climbed. It was not luxurious. I loved it because every payment had been mine. Every repair decision belonged to me, and no one could threaten to remove me if I failed to make them happy. I worked as the financial controls director for Front Range Renewal, a nonprofit that helped families rebuild after wildfires, floods, and sudden displacement. My title sounded more impressive than my daily life. Most mornings involved spreadsheets, contractor invoices, reimbursement requests, emergency housing payments, insurance documentation, and phone calls with people who had lost kitchens, photographs, pets, jobs, or the feeling that the ground beneath them could be trusted. My responsibility was simple to describe and difficult to carry. Make sure donated and insured recovery funds reached the correct families without being delayed, redirected, or stolen. I had become very good at noticing when numbers tried to tell a story that human beings hoped nobody would read. Duplicate invoices. Contractors billing for work never completed. Families pressured into signing checks they did not understand. Employees creating false vendors. Relatives accessing accounts after an elderly homeowner became overwhelmed. I could follow money through layers of excuses until the original choice became visible. Yet for most of my life, I could not recognize the same pattern inside my own family because the amounts began small and the excuses always used the word love. My mother, Diane Bennett, lived outside Columbus, Ohio, in a beige 2-story house with a brick mailbox and a front porch she decorated differently for every season. She had worked as an office manager for a dental practice, before retiring early at 61, claiming stress had affected her blood pressure. My father left when I was 9, and Nolan was 5. He moved to Arizona, remarried, and became a birthday card father who occasionally included $50 and wrote that he hoped we were making our mother proud. Diane raised us mostly alone. That fact became the moral foundation beneath every demand she made afterward. She reminded me constantly that she had worked overtime, skipped vacations, purchased school supplies, and remained unmarried because some mothers choose their children. I believed her. For years, I believed every achievement belonged partly to her because she had survived the years before it. What I did not understand as a child was that my mother considered sacrifice an investment. She expected repayment with interest, and she collected differently from each child. Nolan repaid her by needing her. I repaid her by solving whatever happened after he did. Nolan was charming from the beginning. He had large brown eyes, a quick smile, and the talent of appearing wounded whenever consequences approached. Teachers described him as bright but unfocused. Coaches said he possessed natural ability but lacked discipline. My mother translated every criticism into proof that adults had failed to recognize his potential. When Nolan forgot homework, she emailed the teacher. When he was removed from the basketball team for missing practices, she said the coach had favorites. When he took $20 from her purse at 14, she said he had been embarrassed to ask. When I reminded her that I had been working weekends to save for college applications, she said, "Rachel, you have always been stronger. Why do you need everything to be equal?" That question became the constitution of our household. Nolan needed more because I could survive with less. If he received new shoes, I was old enough to understand the budget. If I needed money for a school trip, I was encouraged to earn it. If Nolan failed, the family gathered around him. If I succeeded, the success proved I did not need gathering. I became the dependable child because the alternative was watching important things disappear. At 15, I began working at a grocery store. At 16, I prepared our household budget after discovering utility shutoff notices beneath a stack of mail. At 17, I completed financial aid applications alone because my mother said forms made her anxious. Nolan spent those years moving between interests: basketball, guitar, sneaker resale, online gaming, a lawn care business that lasted 3 weeks, and each abandoned project became something he had bravely attempted. My consistency was treated less like courage and more like a personality defect. "You were born serious," Diane told relatives. Nolan was born with a bigger heart. What she meant was that his emotions occupied more space. Mine were expected to organize themselves quietly. The first time my mother took money from me, I was 16. I had saved $840 from the grocery store to purchase a used laptop for college applications. One Friday, the money disappeared from the envelope beneath my dresser. Diane admitted taking it only after I cried hard enough that Nolan came downstairs. "The electric bill was overdue," she said. "We would have lost power." I apologized for being angry. A week later, a large box arrived containing a new gaming console for Nolan's birthday. "He's had such a difficult year," she explained. "I used a store payment plan." "With what money?" I asked. Her face changed. "Do not interrogate me in my own home." When I mentioned the laptop, she began crying and said she could not believe the daughter she had raised cared more about a machine than keeping the family together. I borrowed computers from the public library until college. Nolan received the console and told friends our mother had surprised him because she believed in rewarding perseverance. That should have taught me what money meant in our family. Instead, it taught me to hide it better. I attended the University of Cincinnati with scholarships, grants, campus jobs, and loans. Diane told relatives she had put Rachel through college because she occasionally mailed $20 grocery cards. Nolan enrolled at a community college, stopped attending after one semester, and spent the next decade creating new beginnings. A mobile detailing business, a clothing brand, an online fitness program, a food truck proposal, a short period selling home security systems. Each idea arrived with a presentation, urgency, and one expense standing between Nolan and success. My mother called me before she called banks. "Your brother only needs $3,000 to purchase equipment. Nolan has a real opportunity this time. You have a salary, he has a dream. Family should invest in family." Sometimes I gave money. Sometimes I called it a loan. No loan was repaid. When I asked, Diane said I had embarrassed him by creating pressure. Nolan said money had always been my love language, and then accused me of using it to control him. I slowly reduced the amounts, but I kept rescuing emergencies because my mother had trained me to fear what would happen if I did not. Eviction, repossession, depression, shame. Every consequence was presented as something my refusal had caused, rather than something Nolan's decisions had created. I moved to Denver at 26, after accepting a position with a regional accounting firm. The distance helped. I could decline requests without seeing my mother cry in person. I could miss family dinners and blame work. I built a life no one had contributed to enough to claim. I rented a small apartment, worked long hours, earned certifications, and specialized in nonprofit fraud prevention after helping uncover a contractor scheme involving disaster recovery funds. The work felt meaningful because stolen recovery money carried a special cruelty. It did not only take dollars, it took months of safety from people already exhausted by loss. By 31, I had moved to Front Range renewal. By 33, I had saved enough to buy my bungalow after receiving a modest inheritance from my paternal grandmother and selling stock from my previous employer. My personal savings eventually reached just over $300,000, spread across emergency funds, retirement accounts, short-term certificates, and the proceeds I had reserved for renovating the basement into a rental unit. I did not tell my family the amount. They knew I had bought a house and worked in finance. To them, that meant unlimited money disguised as selfishness. Nolan moved to Nashville in his late 20s and reinvented himself as an event entrepreneur. He had always been good at creating excitement, and weddings rewarded presentation. He began coordinating bachelor weekends, proposal dinners, and small corporate events. He later met Savannah Price, a lifestyle photographer with a large social media following, and a family who owned a boutique winery outside Franklin, Tennessee. Savannah was beautiful, ambitious, and skilled at turning ordinary moments into branded proof that her life was exceptional. Nolan appeared in her photographs wearing fitted jackets, holding champagne, and speaking about building experiences instead of chasing things. Behind the photographs, he was living in an apartment paid partly by Diane, driving a leased SUV with 3 missed payments, and using deposits from future events to cover current expenses. Savannah knew some of this. She believed marriage would make him more disciplined. Diane believed Savannah's connections would finally place Nolan inside the successful life he deserved. Their engagement became the most important event our family had experienced since Nolan's birth. He proposed at the winery beneath hanging lights and hired a videographer to capture Savannah's surprise. Diane flew to Tennessee for the weekend and appeared in every photograph. I learned about the engagement through social media while finishing a late-night audit report. Nolan called 2 days later. "You saw the news? Congratulations, you sound like you're responding to a calendar invitation. I'm happy for you. Savannah thinks you don't like her." I had met Savannah twice. During the second meeting, she asked whether I could review Nolan's business accounts and clean them up before marriage, without charging, because family should not invoice family. I barely know her. Exactly. You've never made an effort. The conversation ended with me apologizing for not sounding excited enough. Wedding planning lasted 14 months. The celebration would be held at Savannah's family winery with 300 guests, a welcome dinner, live band, private fireworks, custom floral installations, and a Sunday brunch. Nolan called it an investment in their future brand because photographers, venue owners, and corporate clients would attend. Diane called it the wedding our family never had, as though my parents' failed marriage had created an unpaid invoice. The first request was $8,000 for the photographer, because Savannah's preferred team required an immediate deposit. "Consider it your gift," Diane said. "That is a large gift. You make more than anyone in the family. That doesn't make my money communal. You always reduce love to numbers." I paid $5,000. Nolan promised my name would be included among those who made the weekend possible. The second request was for vendor payments after several clients delayed paying Nolan. I refused. Diane called crying. She said Savannah's parents were beginning to question whether Nolan could provide stability and that my refusal might damage the engagement. If $5,000 decides whether they marry, They should not marry. That is an ugly thing to say about your brother, Nolan later sent a message. Don't worry, I won't ask you for anything again. He asked 11 days later for help negotiating a hotel block. I assisted because the task involved no money. Then I reviewed insurance requirements, corrected a caterer's double charge, and discovered the tent company had billed for equipment not included in the proposal. Each time, Nolan praised my intelligence privately. Publicly, Savannah thanked our incredible planning team. I was not invited to the bridal shower because Savannah wanted an intimate group of women who had supported the relationship from the beginning. Diane attended and posted 43 photographs. I learned there had been a family engagement dinner only after seeing a picture of my mother, Nolan, Savannah's parents, and her younger sister beneath a neon sign reading, "The Future Price Bennetts." Diane captioned it, "Both families together at last." I commented, "Looks beautiful." She deleted the comment and called me. "Why would you write that publicly? It was beautiful. People will read sarcasm into it." "Why? Because you weren't there." "Exactly." She said my habit of turning joyful moments into grievances was why Savannah felt uncomfortable around me. The wedding invitation eventually arrived. My name was listed correctly. I booked a flight, purchased a dress, and planned to attend alone. 2 weeks before the ceremony, Nolan asked whether I could transfer $20,000 to cover the final band and lighting payments. Savannah's father had reached his limit, he said, and vendor cancellations would humiliate everyone. "I have already given $5,000 and performed hours of unpaid work. You can afford it." "That is not an answer. It's one weekend for your only brother, then have the weekend you can pay for." He called me jealous, hung up, and told Diane I had threatened to ruin the wedding. My mother called for 3 days. On the 4th day, she said, "Your brother has spent his entire life feeling like you think you're better than him. You finally have a chance to show him he matters. I have been showing him for 20 years. Then prove it without keeping score." I transferred $10,000 directly to 2 vendors after confirming the balances. Nolan did not thank me. He sent a thumbs-up emoji. At the wedding, I discovered my seat was at table 24 beside Nolan's former co-workers and 2 people who had dated Savannah's cousins. Immediate family sat at a long table near the dance floor. When I asked Diane, she said Savannah had arranged seating based on emotional closeness rather than technical relationships. During family photographs, the photographer called for the bride's immediate family, then the groom's immediate family. I stepped forward. Savannah's planner touched my elbow. "They're doing the core household first. I'm Nolan's sister. There will be an extended family photograph later." The core photograph included Diane, Nolan, Savannah's parents, and Savannah's sister. I stood 30 feet away, holding my purse. The extended photograph never happened because sunset light faded and the couple needed portraits. At the reception, Nolan thanked both sets of parents, Savannah's sister, the wedding party, and everyone who believed in us before success made belief easy. He did not mention me. Diane noticed my expression and whispered, "Do not make his wedding about you." I left after the cake. The next morning, I discovered the family brunch had been moved from the hotel restaurant to a private room at the winery. No one told me. Diane later claimed I had said I was flying home early. I had not. Savannah posted the core family photograph with the caption, "The people who built us." Nolan shared it. I stared at the image inside my airport gate and realized the same family that had accepted $15,000 from me could remove me from the photograph without experiencing contradiction. I stopped sending money after that weekend. For 10 months, contact decreased. Nolan's event business struggled after the wedding. Several clients disputed deposits. Savannah's father refused additional investment. Their marriage became tense. Diane relocated temporarily to Nashville to help them adjust, then returned to Ohio after Savannah asked for space. Nolan began speaking about leaving the United States and starting a wine and events cafe in Lisbon. Savannah had photographed there during college and believed the city offered an affordable creative life. The marriage did not survive long enough for the plan. Savannah filed for separation 8 months after the wedding. She said Nolan had hidden debt, used wedding gifts to cover business expenses, and lied about several client disputes. Diane blamed Savannah's family for expecting perfection. Nolan blamed the pressure of trying to become someone worthy of Savannah. Nobody blamed his decisions. He moved into Diane's house in Ohio. That was when the questions about my money began. Do you keep work and personal banking together? How much does your company insure against fraud? If you lost access to an account, how long would recovery take? Are retirement accounts protected if someone steals your identity? Nolan presented the questions as curiosity about my career. I answered vaguely. Diane visited me in Denver twice during that period. The first visit followed a minor surgery. She said she wanted to help, but she spent most of the week complaining about Nolan's depression and searching my kitchen for paperwork she claimed she needed to organize. During the second visit, she asked to borrow an old laptop because hers had stopped printing recipes. The laptop was stored in my basement and still contained outdated browser profiles, copies of tax returns, and password reset information from years earlier. I erased the drive before giving it to her. At least, I believed I had. She later said the laptop did not work and left it in my guest room. After she returned to Ohio, I placed it back downstairs without checking. Nolan visited 2 months later, claiming he needed a break from Diane. He slept on my sofa, cooked dinner, repaired the leaking basement window, and acted more like the brother I remembered from childhood than he had in years. On his second night, he apologized for the wedding. Not completely. Savannah controlled the pictures, he said. I should have noticed where you were seated. You accepted my money. I know. You allowed Mom to tell people I left brunch early. I didn't know that. Did you ever ask? He looked ashamed enough that I wanted to believe him. I'm sorry. We drank wine on the back patio. He told me the divorce had left him feeling like every version of his future had disappeared. I need one clean beginning, he said. Not another business funded by family. I know. Then what? Maybe Portugal. Get a job. Learn the language. Stop trying to become impressive. It was one of the most honest conversations we had ever shared. The next morning, he asked to use my printer for employment applications. He spent an hour in the basement where the old laptop remained. When he left, he hugged me for a long time. You're the only person who still sees something in me. I nearly told him I loved him. I am grateful I did not because later I would have replayed the sentence as though withholding it could have prevented theft. Love does not create fraud. The person who steals creates fraud. 2 weeks before the email from Lisbon, my mother called to say Nolan had received a short-term hospitality opportunity in Portugal. She wanted to accompany him for the first month because he was emotionally fragile after the divorce. How are you paying for flights? I asked. I sold some jewelry. Which jewelry? Why does everything need an audit? Because you recently asked me for help with property taxes. She hung up. 3 days later, she apologized and said she had borrowed money from a friend. Nolan sent a photograph of 2 suitcases and wrote, "New chapter." I replied, "Good luck." They flew on Saturday. The theft occurred Sunday night. By Monday morning, my personal emergency account, renovation savings, several certificates, and an investment account had been drained or pledged through fraudulent transfer requests. The total personal loss was approximately $318,000. The remaining $194,000 came from a recovery reserve account linked to my professional banking portal. Front Range Renewal maintained the reserve for 12 families displaced by a wildfire west of Colorado Springs. The money was awaiting final contractor approvals. I had access authority but no ownership. Nolan and Diane used my credentials, security answers, and an old authentication device to access every linked account visible through one dashboard. They did not understand the difference between personal assets and restricted program funds. To them, every number beside my name belonged to the daughter who had too much. The email arrived at 6:12. I was standing in my kitchen wearing socks and an old college sweatshirt. Coffee had just finished brewing. The subject line said, "Now you know what it feels like to have nothing." I opened the message, and saw Diane wearing sunglasses at a waterfront cafe, one hand around a glass of sparkling wine. Nolan stood beside her in a linen shirt, smiling toward the river. They looked relaxed, victorious. Beneath the photograph, she wrote, "Nolan and I took back the $512,000 you were hoarding. Do not waste what little you have left chasing us. Family money should help family, and you have spent years using yours to make everyone feel small. Enjoy the empty accounts. Maybe now you will understand that a successful job does not make you better than your mother and brother." Nolan sent his own message 1 minute later. "Try auditing your way out of this." My coffee mug slipped from my hand and shattered across the tile. I did not move. Hot coffee spread between my feet. A piece of ceramic touched my sock. The house became so quiet that I could hear the refrigerator cycle off. I read the messages again. Not because I misunderstood. Because some part of the brain believes cruelty will become less deliberate if examined closely enough. The photograph remained the same. My mother's smile was not frightened. Nolan's face contained no shame. They had planned an emotional ending for me. Broke, humiliated, unable to fight, expected to understand. I stepped over the ceramic and opened my laptop. The personal dashboard showed zeros, pending transfers, and security alerts. An account labeled Bennett Family Ventures had received several transfers before funds moved internationally. They had created a fake business using our name, as though theft became legitimate once formatted professionally. Then, I opened the Front Range portal. The reserve balance had dropped. My hands became cold. That was the moment the betrayal stopped belonging only to me. 12 families were waiting for money to repair roofs, replace septic systems, and return home before winter. One couple was living with 3 children in an extended stay motel. An elderly man had been sleeping in a trailer beside the burned foundation of the house he had shared with his wife. Diane and Nolan believed all the money was mine. Their ignorance did not reduce the harm. I checked security logs. An old authentication device had been activated from Ohio 2 weeks earlier. Password resets used answers my mother knew, the name of my first pet, my elementary school, the city where I was born. Access came through the laptop Nolan used in my basement. Additional logins originated from an airport lounge, a New Jersey hotel near Newark, and Lisbon. They had not made one desperate transfer. They had spent weeks building a route. I hovered over Diane's number. The daughter inside me wanted to call. I wanted her to say someone had forced them, that she had misunderstood, that the email was a joke sent during panic, that she regretted everything before consequences arrived. Then, Nolan's second email appeared. "Don't try to freeze anything. We already moved enough to start over. If you cared half as much about us as you care about strangers in spreadsheets, none of this would have been necessary." Strangers in spreadsheets. The families whose homes had burned became strangers. My career became a personality flaw. Their theft became a response to emotional neglect. Something inside me went still. I did not call. I photographed the broken mug and the time on my laptop because shock sometimes destroys sequence. Then I began building a timeline. My best friend, Jade Moreno, answered on the first ring. Jade was a project manager at a commercial architecture firm and had known me since our first year in Denver. She had the rare ability to offer care without converting another person's crisis into her opportunity to feel useful. Rachel? My mother and Nolan stole the money. What money? Everything they could reach. My voice sounded distant. Some of it belongs to the recovery reserve. Silence. Are you physically safe? Yes. Do they have house access? Nolan had a key. Change the locks today. Do not call them. Do not post. Do not explain. Call the bank and your compliance officer. I'm coming. You have work. I am informing work that my best friend has an emergency. Jade. You do not need to earn assistance by making the emergency convenient. That sentence broke the stillness. I began crying. Not loudly. My body folded over the kitchen table while the coffee cooled on the floor. Jade arrived 40 minutes later carrying breakfast, a notebook, trash bags, and a pair of shoes because I had mentioned broken ceramic. She cleaned the floor while I contacted the bank's fraud department. Front Range Renewal's executive director, and our compliance officer, Daniel Reed. Telling Daniel was the hardest call. My voice shook while I explained that family members had stolen my identity and accessed an account tied to the program. Did you authorize any movement? No. When did you discover it? 38 minutes ago. Have you preserved the access logs? Yes. Did you call them? No. Good. Rachel, listen carefully. You did not cause this. Your responsibility now is immediate reporting, documentation, and protecting the remaining funds. You are doing that. Being believed almost destroyed the control I had regained. Will the families lose their payments? We will use emergency reserves if necessary. No family loses housing because someone targeted you. That was leadership, not reassurance without action. He contacted the bank, insurer, and board. I sent screenshots, emails, account logs, and the photograph from Lisbon. By noon, accounts connected to Bennett Family Ventures were frozen. International cards linked to the stolen funds stopped working. The Recovery Reserves insurer initiated restoration procedures. My personal accounts remained uncertain. The emotional damage was immediate. The financial outcome would take time. At 3:14 that afternoon, Diane called. I let it ring. Nolan called twice. Then my mother left a voicemail. Rachel, do not be dramatic. We are safe. We are finally breathing. You have always had more than you needed, and Nolan deserves one chance without you standing over him with a calculator. We will discuss repayment when the cafe succeeds. Do not embarrass this family by involving outsiders. Her voice contained irritation, not guilt. She expected complaint, not resistance. 10 minutes later, Nolan sent a photograph from inside a tiled apartment with tall windows. Home for now. You should visit once you calm down. I saved it. They posted constantly during the first 2 days. Diane beneath yellow Lisbon trams, Nolan on a rooftop holding wine. Caption: Sometimes peace begins when you leave toxic expectations behind. Another photograph showed them beside a real estate agent. Building something that finally belongs to us. Relatives commented with hearts. Aunt Carol wrote, "So happy you're choosing yourselves." No one asked how a retired office manager and unemployed event planner suddenly afforded an international move. That was not because the explanation seemed reasonable. It was because my mother had spent years preparing them to interpret my money as family property. She told relatives I was obsessed with control, that I refused to help Nolan after his divorce, that I treated her like an employee submitting expense reports. When people already believe one sibling is greedy, the other sibling's sudden comfort looks like justice. I wanted to post the email. Jade stopped me. The truth matters. Timing also matters. They are telling everyone I am toxic. People who believe vacation photographs over your direct voice are not the first emergency. They'll control the story, only until accounts, jobs, and relatives begin asking questions they cannot answer. I remained silent, publicly. Privately, I saved everything. The first frozen card message arrived that evening. Nolan. What did you do? Then, the apartment manager says payment failed. Then, fix this before Mom panics, Diane sent. You are proving exactly why we had to leave. I did not respond. The following day, they attempted another transfer through a mobile banking service using my identity information. Because the accounts were flagged, the attempt created additional records. They also tried paying a 6-month lease on a small cafe property. The payment failed. The broker demanded proof of funds. Nolan called 19 times. I answered none. My mother emailed, "You can freeze cards, but you cannot freeze family." Jade read it and said, "She has mistaken a slogan for a banking principle." I laughed for the first time since Monday. Then guilt followed the laugh. My family was panicking overseas, and some part of me remained trained to treat their panic as my assignment. Do you want them harmed? Jade asked. No. Do you want them housed? Yes. Do you want to restore access to stolen money? No. Then their next step is finding legitimate help, not you reopening the account. Diane contacted relatives. Aunt Carol called crying. Your mother says you stranded them in a foreign country. They purchased flights with money taken from my accounts. She says it was a loan. Did she show you permission? Rachel, she is still your mother. And I am still the daughter she stole from. Money can be replaced. Then she can replace it. Aunt Carol said I sounded cruel and hung up. My cousin Blake texted, "Whatever Nolan did, don't ruin his life. He's been through enough." No one asked what I had been through. They wanted a quiet victim because a quiet victim allowed everyone else to keep Thanksgiving uncomplicated. I stopped answering family calls. 5 days after the theft, my mother called from an unfamiliar number at 2 in the morning. Jade was sleeping in my guest room because we had changed the locks, and I had not yet learned to feel safe alone. I answered on speaker after beginning a recording permitted under Colorado law. Diane did not say hello. Do you have any idea what you have done? Are you calling to return the money? Return it? Rachel, stop speaking like a collection agency. You took money without permission. You abandoned us years ago. You moved away, built this superior little life, and made your brother beg for scraps. Nolan received $15,000 for a wedding where I was not seated with family. Savannah planned the tables. You told people I left brunch early. Because explaining your attitude would have ruined the weekend. You rewrote my exclusion to protect the photograph. There you go again. Everything is evidence to you. It is when people lie. Diane's voice sharpened. That money was sitting there while Nolan's life collapsed. Part of it was waiting to rebuild homes for families who survived a wildfire. Silence. What are you talking about? You accessed an account you did not understand. I heard movement. Nolan took the phone. Whose money? His voice changed immediately. The arrogance vanished. The reserve account. Whose money was that? Not yours. Mom said everything in the portal belonged to you. Mom was wrong. Diane shouted in the background. You never told us there were other accounts. The accusation stunned me. I never gave you permission to enter any account. The bank says there may be an investigation, Nolan said. They used the word restricted. Then you should speak with an attorney. Fix it. No, Rachel, I'm serious. So am I. You can tell your company it was a misunderstanding. It was intentional. We thought it was your money. That does not help you. It helps morally. You believed stealing from me was moral. You had more. That is not consent. Diane returned to the phone crying. The speed of the emotional transformation would once have controlled me. Rachel, please. I am your mother. I made a mistake because I was afraid for your brother. You emailed me to enjoy being broke. I was angry, before or after creating Bennett Family Ventures. Nolan handled the details. You knew. I knew we were borrowing. You moved overseas. We planned to repay it when the cafe succeeded. With what repayment schedule? Why are you speaking like this? Because vague family language is how you hide specific choices. She began sobbing harder. If you love me, you will fix this. The old sentence. The old door. I looked toward Jade. She placed one hand over her heart and shook her head slowly, not instructing me, reminding me I could choose. I did love you, I said. That is why this worked for so long. You confused my love with guaranteed access. I ended the call. My hands shook for 20 minutes. Strength does not mean the nervous system immediately believes the boundary is safe. The money situation stabilized over the next 2 weeks. The nonprofit reserve was restored through frozen transfers, bank recovery, and insurance while the investigation continued. None of the 12 families lost scheduled payments. I met with the board, compliance officers, and outside reviewers. I described every failure point, including my own. The old laptop should have been destroyed, not stored. Family security answers should not have remained active. Sensitive accounts should have required hardware authentication unavailable at my home. Daniel Reed stopped me when I began apologizing for the theft itself. Improve the system, he said. Do not accept moral responsibility for another adult committing fraud. My job remained secure. The board required new controls, several of which I proposed. The relief was enormous. but it did not erase humiliation. I had built a career identifying financial manipulation and still allowed my own mother and brother close enough to use childhood information against me. Shame whispered that expertise should make betrayal impossible. Therapy later taught me the opposite. Manipulators do not defeat knowledge. They bypass it through trust. Nolan lost his latest job after his employer discovered he had traveled internationally while claiming to work remotely from Ohio. The employer also learned he had used company equipment during the account access. The cafe lease disappeared. The Lisbon apartment shortened their stay after payment failures. They moved into a less expensive short-term rental and began contacting the American embassy, relatives, and church friends for help returning home. Diane sold jewelry online. Nolan attempted freelance event work but lacked language skills and local authorization. Their glamorous posts stopped. A final photograph showed Diane beside the river wearing the same sunglasses, captioned, "Choosing gratitude even when someone wants to punish you." Comments were fewer. One person asked whether they were returning for Christmas. Diane did not answer. Relatives began questioning the story after a publicly available complaint identified unauthorized transfers. Aunt Carol sent, "I didn't know the money was stolen." I replied, "You did not ask." She apologized. I did not reassure her. Being believed after documentation is different from being trusted before it becomes socially inconvenient to doubt you. Nolan and Diane returned to Ohio 6 weeks after leaving. They arrived separately from their luggage because several bags had been held over unpaid fees. Diane moved back into her house. Nolan slept in the basement. The house had become financially entangled because my mother used it to support part of the stolen transfer route. She began telling relatives, "I was trying to make her homeless." I was not. The bank and insurer sought recovery. I did not control every consequence. That distinction mattered because my mother spoke as though I personally selected each hardship. Rachel froze my house. Rachel made Nolan lose his job. Rachel ruined our chance in Portugal. She never said, "We stole money and used the house while moving it." Passive language remained her final defense. The first request for a family settlement arrived in October. Diane wanted me to withdraw complaints involving my personal funds, state publicly that the reserve access was accidental, and accept repayment over 20 years without interest. In exchange, she promised not to challenge my grandmother's inheritance or tell relatives I had abandoned her. Threat disguised as compromise. Nolan wrote separately, "If this becomes permanent, I will never recover. Is that what you want?" I replied only through the mediator handling restitution. The repayment and consequences should reflect what occurred. I am not responsible for constructing a version that protects his future more than he protected mine. Thanksgiving approached. I intended to remain in Colorado with Jade and several friends. Then my Aunt Melissa, Diane's younger sister, called. Unlike Aunt Carol, Melissa had not contacted me during the initial scandal because she said she did not understand enough to speak responsibly. "Your mother is planning a family meeting at Thanksgiving," she said. "She has written a statement for you to sign. I'm not attending. Then she will read it as though you agreed to discuss it and tell everyone your absence proves guilt. What does the statement say? That the transfers were a misunderstood family loan and you became aggressive because your company pressured you. Why are you telling me? Because I spent years watching Diane decide what happened before anyone else entered the room. I'm tired." "Whose house?" "Mine." "Why are you allowing it?" "Because if I cancel, everyone retreats into separate stories. I want one conversation where the words remain attached to the person saying them." Jade asked whether attending would help me or keep me tied to people I had already escaped. My therapist asked the same question. The honest answer contained two motives. I wanted relatives to understand. I also wanted to see my mother's confidence disappear when the lie no longer worked. Anger was present. I did not pretend otherwise. "Will you sign anything?" Jade asked. "No." "Will you give them money?" "No." "Will you go alone?" "No." Jade agreed to travel with me. She was not a lawyer, bodyguard, or witness. I needed to prove sanity. She was the person who had stood beside the broken mug and never asked me to make the crisis comfortable. Thanksgiving took place at Melissa's farmhouse outside Yellow Springs, Ohio. 26 relatives attended. The house smelled like sage, cinnamon, and the wood smoke from a fireplace that never drafted correctly. Diane arrived wearing a burgundy sweater and the pearls she reserved for church and conflict. Nolan wore an expensive watch purchased in Lisbon before the freeze. I recognized the charge from the account review. He had gained weight, lost some hair, and acquired the defensive stillness of someone who had spent months rehearsing why consequences were unfair. My place card sat at the far end of the table near the kitchen door. Nolan's was beside Diane at the center. I picked up my card and placed it beside Jade. Diane saw. Please don't begin making symbolic gestures. Then stop using seating to describe the family. She exhaled loudly. This is exactly the kind of hostility we hope to avoid. I have been inside the house for 40 seconds, Melissa said. Let her sit where she wants. The room quieted. Diane smiled tightly. Of course. Dinner began with prayer. My uncle thanked God for second chances, humble hearts, and the ability to place family above pride. Several people looked at me. Nolan bowed his head more deeply. Conversation remained strained through turkey, stuffing, sweet potatoes, green beans, and rolls. Diane asked relatives about children and jobs, performing normal motherhood. Nolan described looking for work in event management and said the Lisbon experience had broadened him. Nobody mentioned the stolen money until my cousin Blake asked whether I was still doing those wildfire accounts. Yes. Were the families affected? Their funds were restored, Diane interrupted, because there was never any intention to take from strangers. You took from an account without knowing who owned it, which proves it was an accident. It proves you did not understand what you were stealing. Nolan set down his fork. Can we eat one meal without you speaking like a prosecutor? You sent an email telling me to audit my way out of it. I was angry. Anger did not create the fake company. Here we go, Diane whispered. Melissa said, we were going to discuss it after dessert. You planned the agenda without me, I replied. Somebody had to create structure, Diane said. You created Bennett Family Ventures too. Jade pressed her lips together to avoid laughing. Diane glared. After dessert, Melissa cleared the pie plates and placed a small audio recorder on the sideboard at my request. Everyone knew it was there. No secret recording. No hidden trap. Diane stood with a folder. This family has suffered enough, she began. A financial misunderstanding became a public crisis because fear, pride, and outside pressure replaced communication. She distributed a printed statement. We have prepared a path toward healing that protects Rachel's career, restores family relationships, and gives Nolan and me a realistic chance to rebuild. The first paragraph said Diane and Nolan believed the accounts represented shared family resources created partly through sacrifices Diane made while raising us. The second said I had previously supported Nolan financially, creating an understandable belief that further support had been promised. The third described the Lisbon move as a planned family venture, not an escape. The fourth said the restricted reserve was accessed accidentally because my professional and personal funds appeared together. The fifth required me to acknowledge that freezing every account created unnecessary hardship and public humiliation. The sixth proposed a symbolic repayment amount based on what remained after shared family contributions were recognized. The final paragraph contained the public apology they wanted me to post. I regret allowing work stress and unresolved childhood resentment to cause me to misrepresent a temporary family loan as deliberate theft. My mother and brother made mistakes, but they never intended to harm me or the families served by my organization. We are healing privately and ask others to respect our unity. Beneath it were 3 signature lines. Diane's was signed, Nolan's was signed. Mine waited blank. You wrote my confession for me, I said. Diane smiled sadly. We wrote language that allows everyone to move forward with dignity. Whose dignity? All of ours. Where does it say you accessed my laptop? Technical details do not belong in a family statement. Where does it say you created a fake company? The company was intended for the Lisbon venture. Where does it say you emailed me to enjoy being broke? Words spoken in anger should not define a lifetime. Where does it say you believed I would be unable to afford a fight? Her face changed slightly. I don't know what you mean. Nolan looked toward her. I removed a small speaker from my bag and placed it in the center of the table. Before they left Ohio, my mother sent Nolan a voice message through the laptop they used. The file synchronized when the account access was reviewed. Diane became pale. That is private. It discusses making me financially unable to respond. Rachel, Melissa warned gently. Not to stop me, but to ensure I knew what I was choosing. Play it, Nolan said suddenly. Diane turned toward him. You don't know what she has. Then let everyone hear it. I pressed play. Diane's recorded voice filled the dining room. Once we are in Lisbon, she can yell all she wants. She won't have enough left to fight us, and by the time the bank understands anything, the money will be somewhere she cannot reach. Do not lose your nerve. This is your chance to get back everything she has held over the family. The message ended. No dramatic music. Just the refrigerator humming in Melissa's kitchen, and one child laughing faintly in another room. Aunt Carol covered her mouth. Blake stared at the statement. Nolan looked toward the floor. Diane said, You don't understand the context. Explain it. I was trying to encourage your brother. To do what? Start over, using money taken from my accounts, using resources you never would have shared fairly. So, you admit you intended it. I admit I believed the family deserved help, without asking. You would have said no. Exactly. She became angry. Because you enjoy saying no. You enjoy watching Nolan struggle because it proves you made better choices. I paid for part of his wedding, and reminded everyone. I was seated beside strangers and cropped from the family photograph. Savannah arranged the photograph. You captioned it both families together at last. It was a joyful day. Not for your daughter. Everything cannot be about your feelings. But $500,000 can be about Nolan's? Nolan stood. Stop talking about me like I'm not here. Then explain your part, I said. I was desperate. For what? A life that did not feel like failure. His voice cracked. Savannah left. The business collapsed. Everyone looked at me like they had always known I was a fraud. Mom said Lisbon could be a clean start. Why not get a job? I applied. How many? That isn't the point. It is when you funded an international move by stealing. I thought we could repay it. With cafe profits from a cafe you had not opened, people borrow for businesses every day. They borrow with permission. You would never have given it. Correct. Because you have never believed in me. The old wound entered the room. I believed in every version you presented until the pattern became too expensive. You always judged me. I gave you money, reviewed contracts, corrected invoices, and helped save wedding vendors from overcharging you. You made sure I knew you were smarter. I tried to prevent damage. You liked being the responsible one. No, I became responsible because the family became dangerous when no one was. Diane said, There, that superiority. That is what we lived with. I looked at her. When I was 16, you took my laptop savings for the electric bill and purchased Nolan a gaming console. We needed electricity. Why the console? He was depressed. I was working 20 hours a week while attending school. You handled pressure better. So my strength became his budget. She slammed one hand against the table. I raised you alone. Yes. I gave up everything, and you spent 30 years collecting repayment from the child least likely to leave. Tears entered her eyes. You think I loved him more. You protected him more. He needed me. You taught him to. The sentence landed. Nolan looked toward Diane. She stared at me as though I had exposed something more private than theft. That is cruel. It may be. Is it false? She sat down. Melissa spoke quietly. Diane, why did Rachel's savings become available whenever Nolan needed a reset? Because she had more. That is not an answer. She always landed on her feet. Because she learned nobody would catch her. Melissa said. My mother began crying. For most of my life, that sound had functioned like an alarm. Fix it. Apologize. Make the room safe for her. This time, I let her cry. Aunt Carol looked at me. Rachel, she is your mother. Yes. Doesn't that matter? It mattered when she knew my security questions. Silence. Nolan picked up the statement. What do you want from us? Repayment through whatever process is already in place. No contact with my employer, clients, bank, neighbors, or friends. No public posts implying I gave permission. No family members carrying messages. No requests for loans, housing, or business help. My relationship with each relative will be separate and voluntary. And Mom? No contact. Diane looked up sharply. For how long? Indefinitely. You would cut off your own mother over money? You did not only take money. You tried to remove my ability to respond. I was angry. You spent weeks planning. I gave birth to you. That is history, not permanent access. She stood. I will not sit here while my daughter speaks to me like a criminal, Melissa replied. Then you should not have stolen from her. The entire table turned toward her. Diane's face collapsed. Her younger sister had spent decades avoiding confrontation. You too, Diane whispered. I should have said things years ago. Melissa's voice shook. You always described Rachel as cold because she refused to keep making Nolan's consequences disappear. We believed you because it was easier than asking why you needed so much from one child and expected nothing from the other. Nolan said, I have suffered consequences, mostly after Rachel stopped paying. Melissa answered. He looked toward me. Do you want me homeless? No. Unemployed? No. Then help me. Those outcomes are yours to solve. You have contacts. I will not refer someone who used my identity to steal. So you do want me ruined. You keep translating the absence of rescue into active harm. He laughed bitterly. That sounds like something from therapy. It is something from experience. Diane pushed the unsigned statement toward me. Sign it, and we can at least stop destroying each other. Signing it would require me to lie. Families soften language. Healthy families do not require one person to deny reality, so everyone else can keep a comfortable story. You care more about being right than being loved. No, I finally understand that people who love me should not require me to be wrong. I tore the signature page once and placed it beside my plate. Not into dramatic pieces. One tear through my name. There will be no statement. Diane's anger returned. Then do not expect us to repay you willingly. Repayment is not dependent on your willingness anymore. You are taking my house. I did not use your house to support stolen transfers. You know the process will force me to sell. Then direct your anger toward the decision that placed it at risk. You sound heartless. I sound unavailable. Nolan removed the Lisbon watch and placed it on the table. Take it. I don't want your watch. You keep mentioning it. Because it represents how you spent money while telling me this was survival. Sell it, you sell it. I don't know how to fix any of this. For the first time that evening, he sounded less manipulative than lost. Begin by stopping the belief that I am the tool. Will you ever speak to me again? Not until restitution is established and you can communicate without requests. How long? I don't know. Years. Possibly, he cried then, quietly. I remembered him at 5, following me around our apartment. At 12, asking me to help with homework. At 19, calling after his first breakup. Love remained. That did not make him safe. I'm sorry, he said. For what? He hesitated. For taking the money. Why did you take it? Because I wanted a life that looked successful before I had done anything to support it. The answer surprised everyone, including him. What else? Because Mom said you owed us. Diane whispered his name. He continued. Because every time you helped, I hated you for proving I needed help. Stealing felt like taking control. What else? His face twisted. Because I thought you would recover. You always recover. There it was. You treated my resilience as insurance. He nodded, crying. Yes. Thank you for telling the truth. Does that change anything? It may change you. What about us? Not tonight, Diane said. So Nolan apologizes, and you still reject him. An apology is not a password. Jade reached beneath the table and squeezed my hand once. Melissa asked whether I wanted to stay for coffee. No. I stood. I came so no one could say the facts remained unclear. They are clear now. Aunt Carol approached. Can I hug you? No. She stepped back, hurt. I'm trying to apologize. Use words. I'm sorry I accused you before asking what happened. Thank you. Can we speak later? Maybe. I collected my coat. Diane remained seated. If you leave now, you may never see me again. The sentence had controlled me since childhood. One day I will be gone. You will regret this. Family does not last forever. That is possible, I said. Her face changed. She had expected fear. You would live with that? I have been living with the fact that my mother tried to leave me broke. I walked out with Jade. The November air was cold enough to hurt my teeth. We sat inside the rental car without starting it. My hands began shaking. Do you regret going? Jade asked. No. Do you feel better? No. Those can both be true. We drove to a small hotel near Dayton and ate vending machine crackers because every restaurant had closed. The evening did not resemble victory. It resembled grief without confusion. That difference was enough. Restitution took nearly 2 years. Most of the nonprofit reserve had already been restored. My personal recovery came through frozen funds, the sale of assets Diane and Nolan had purchased, insurance coverage, and structured repayment. I did not receive every dollar. By the time fees, spending, and failed transfers were accounted for, a significant loss remained. I sold the bungalow rather than complete the basement renovation because living where Nolan had searched my devices made me uneasy. I purchased a smaller townhouse near Golden, with better security, and no guest room large enough for relatives to interpret as an invitation. The first night, I slept on a mattress on the floor, and woke twice checking the door. Safety does not arrive instantly because a new lock exists. It grows through repeated mornings when the lock remains yours. My career recovered. Front Range Renewal promoted me 2 years later after I helped redesign the organization's financial access system. I almost declined because promotion felt connected to the theft. Daniel Reed said, "Your family attacked the system. Your response improved it. Do not hand them ownership of your growth too." We created stronger separation between employee credentials and program funds, hardware authentication stored outside private homes, and emergency procedures for identity theft involving relatives. We also began offering financial safety workshops to families rebuilding after disasters. Loss makes people vulnerable to pressure from contractors, partners, adult children, siblings, and anyone who recognizes exhaustion. I never told participants my entire story. I said only, shared blood does not replace written permission. Jade remained my chosen family. She received no financial authority, no emergency passwords, and no key she had not asked whether I wanted her to hold. Trust became more deliberate after betrayal, not absent. She married a landscape architect named Luis 3 years later. I stood beside her at the ceremony. When the photographer called for family, Jade pulled me into the center before anyone asked. "You're in this one," she said. I cried harder than I had intended. She did not post the photograph until everyone approved it. Small respect can expose how much disrespect a person once normalized. Melissa and I developed a limited relationship. She apologized without demanding reassurance. "I knew Diane used guilt," she said. "I thought it was easier to let the children handle their own relationship. I was a child when it began. I know, she did not ask me to attend holidays with Diane. She did not carry messages. We spoke every few months. Aunt Carol attempted reconciliation through repeated Bible verses and invitations. I declined. Forgiveness used as social pressure remained another form of control. Nolan's first real apology arrived 18 months after Thanksgiving. It was handwritten. I kept saying I thought the money was family money. That was a lie I used after getting caught. I knew it belonged to you. I also knew you would say no. Mom gave me your old security answers and told me you had hidden money from us for years. I wanted to believe taking it was balance, because the alternative was admitting I was stealing from the sister who had rescued me repeatedly. He wrote about the wedding. I knew you were seated away from family. Savannah said you would make the photographs tense, and I agreed because I wanted her day to remain perfect. I accepted your money and then treated your presence like a risk. When you left early, I felt relieved. I am ashamed of that. He admitted that the Lisbon plan was never realistic. The cafe presentation existed because I needed the theft to sound like investment. I believed once the money produced something beautiful, you would eventually forgive the method. He ended. I am not asking for access. I am asking you to know I understand the word theft now. I replied 6 months later. Thank you for naming what happened. I am not ready for contact. He answered. Understood. For the first time, he accepted a no without creating an emergency. Diane's messages remained different. She wrote through relatives, then new email addresses. A mother should not have to beg her child. I hope your success keeps you warm when I am gone. Nolan has apologized. What more do you want? My house is being sold because of you. You have always loved punishment. Each message centered her suffering. None said, I plan to leave you unable to fight. I blocked every new address. 3 years after Thanksgiving, a letter arrived through Melissa. Diane had written it during counseling. I believed Rachel's success proved I had been a good mother, but I resented that her independence made me less necessary. Nolan's dependence made me feel important. Whenever Rachel set a boundary, I experienced it as rejection. Whenever Nolan failed, I experienced it as an opportunity to prove love. I took from her because I believed the child who needed me less owed more. She admitted the laptop theft, the fake company, the voice message, and the plan to make litigation unaffordable. I wanted her powerless long enough that family pressure would force a settlement. That sentence mattered because it removed accident. She wrote, I am sorry I treated the daughter who built stability as the emergency fund for the son I trained not to build his own. No request appeared until the final line. I would like one conversation before I die, but I understand the answer may remain no. Diane was not dying. She was 68 and generally healthy. The phrase before I die remained a familiar lever. I sent no reply. People asked whether ignoring a specific apology made me cruel. They did not live inside the body that had spent decades responding to her urgency. Remorse may have become real. Access remained unsafe. Those truths can coexist. Nolan changed more consistently. He entered a debt management program, worked in hotel operations, and stopped describing every job as temporary preparation for entrepreneurship. He repaid small amounts monthly, even after the formal requirement ended. No gifts, emotional essays, or sudden transfers designed to purchase contact. Just consistent payments. 4 years after Thanksgiving, I agreed to meet him in a public cafe in Indianapolis, halfway between our homes. He arrived early and wore no expensive watch. Do you hate me? He asked after we sat. No. Did you? Sometimes. Do you forgive me? I no longer need your life to collapse. Is that forgiveness? Part of it. Will we ever be siblings again? We remain siblings. The question is whether we have a relationship. Do we? A small one may be possible. He nodded. What rules? No money, no business ideas, no messages from Mom. No questions about my accounts, house, salary, or estate. No public photographs without asking. No using my attendance anywhere as proof that the family is healed. What if I need help? Ask someone else first. He smiled sadly. That one's fair. Do not call it fair to make the limit sound temporary. Right. We met once the following year, then twice a year. The relationship remained narrow. He eventually apologized without asking whether the apology had worked. He spoke about ordinary life, work schedules, books, a woman he began dating. When he became engaged again, he told me before posting publicly. You are invited, he said. No expectation, no money, no tasks. Will Mom attend? Yes. Then I won't. He accepted it. The wedding was small, held at a public garden. I sent a card. No check. He wrote, "Thank you for respecting the marriage without violating your boundary." That sentence showed more growth than any speech. Diane and I have not spoken since the theft. She eventually sold the Ohio house and moved into a condominium near Melissa. Restitution contributed to the sale, but not every dollar went to me. She had debts unrelated to the case. She tells some relatives she lost everything because her daughter refused forgiveness. Others know the truth. I stopped monitoring which version circulates. Controlling every observer's understanding would have made my life another extension of hers. Self-worth required accepting that some people will believe the story most convenient to them. My peace no longer depends on correcting every room. I began dating carefully in my late 30s. Trust felt administrative at first. Separate accounts. Locked devices. Questions that sounded like interviews. Then I met Marcus Lee, a public school science teacher who understood that privacy and secrecy were different. On our 5th date, I told him my mother and brother had stolen more than $500,000 and fled overseas. He did not ask why I had allowed them access. He asked, "What makes you feel safe now?" No one had phrased the question that way. "Choice," I said. "Knowing help doesn't create ownership," he remembered. We married 4 years later in a small ceremony near Red Rocks. Jade stood beside me. Nolan did not attend because Diane's absence would have created another family conflict, and I did not want the day organized around either of them. He understood. Melissa attended. No one gave me away. I walked with Marcus because we were entering together. During photographs, the photographer asked for immediate family. I looked at Jade, Melissa, Daniel and his wife, and several friends who had stayed through the investigation. "These people," I said. Nobody questioned the biology. Marcus and I kept separate personal accounts and one shared household account. Not because I expected betrayal. Because financial autonomy made generosity easier. Every transfer was discussed. Every large decision required 2 yeses. Love did not become colder. It became clearer. We later fostered a 16-year-old named Kayla through a short-term placement program. She had been removed from an aunt's home after relatives repeatedly used her survivor benefits for household expenses. During her first week, she apologized before eating snacks. "You bought them," she said. "For the house," I replied. "Do I have to ask?" You should ask before finishing something another person specifically saved. You do not need permission to eat. She stared at me as though testing whether the rule would change. I recognized the look. We did not adopt Kayla because reunification with another relative eventually became possible, but we remained mentors. Before she left, I helped her open an account no family member could access without her consent. "What if they say family shares?" she asked. "Sharing requires a choice." That sentence became the simplest summary of everything I had learned. Front Range Renewal later created a financial abuse response fund for displaced people whose relatives had intercepted insurance or recovery payments. We named it Clearground. The program offered temporary banking support, identity restoration, legal referrals, and secure payment methods. I did not name it after myself or turn the theft into branding. Pain becomes useful when it creates safety, not when it demands permanent attention. At the program's first anniversary, a woman in her 60s told me her adult son had redirected part of her insurance payment after a flood. "He said he was protecting me from making emotional decisions," she said. When I objected, everyone said I should be grateful he was helping. I thought about Diane's email, Nolan's cafe, and the Thanksgiving apology. "Help that cannot tolerate questions is control," I told her. She began crying. So did I. Some wounds remain tender because they continue identifying danger accurately. Last Thanksgiving, 12 years after the Lisbon email, Marcus and I hosted 17 people at our home. Jade and Luis, Kayla and her fiancé, Melissa, Daniel and his wife, several coworkers. Nolan was invited for dessert only, a boundary we had discussed in advance. Diane was not invited. He arrived at 7 with a store-bought pie and no overnight bag. That detail mattered. Earlier versions of Nolan assumed every invitation contained accommodation. He placed the pie on the counter. Where should I sit? Anywhere open. He chose a chair near the end, no center, no grievance. After dinner, Kayla asked whether we could take a photograph. My body still tightened slightly around family pictures. Marcus noticed. Private? He asked. Private. We used a timer. Nolan stood at the back until Jade said, "You can move forward if Rachel wants." He looked at me rather than assuming. I nodded. He stood beside Melissa, not beside me. The photograph did not prove full reconciliation. It recorded the exact relationship that existed. One evening, limited access, no financial meaning. Before leaving, Nolan handed me an envelope. Open it later. My body stiffened. He noticed. It is not money. What is it? A copy of the wedding photograph. Which one? The one without you. Why would I want that? You don't. He looked ashamed. I wrote something on the back. After he left, I opened it. On the back of the core family photograph, Nolan had written, "Rachel paid vendors, reviewed contracts, fixed our mistakes, and then stood outside this frame because I valued the appearance of family more than my sister. This photograph is incomplete because I chose for it to be." Beneath that was a second photograph, printed from a candid image taken by a guest. It showed me alone near the edge of the vineyard holding my purse while the family posed. "This is the picture I should have looked at," he wrote. I cried. Marcus asked whether the gesture changed the boundary. No. Did it matter? Yes. People often demand that emotional truth produce an immediate practical reward. Apology leads to invitation. Remorse leads to inheritance. Tears lead to access. That is how manipulative families turn accountability into another transaction. Nolan's gesture mattered because it did not purchase anything. He left after dessert. Our next meeting remained months away. The relationship stayed small. That is what made it real. I sometimes wonder whether I will speak to Diane before she dies. The question no longer frightens me the way it once did. She may die without hearing my voice again. I may grieve the mother I had, the mother I wanted, and the woman she eventually tried to become. Grief does not create obligation retroactively. I can believe her apology contained truth, and still know my nervous system deserves a life that does not reopen every time she feels lonely. No contact is not always a punishment. Sometimes, it is the environment in which healing finally stops being interrupted. The strongest moment in my story was not the account freeze, the failed Lisbon cafe, the Thanksgiving recording, or the recovery of the money. It happened at my kitchen table immediately after the mug shattered. I opened my mother's contact and did not call. For the first time, I stopped asking the person who harmed me to explain whether I had permission to feel harmed. That decision created every boundary afterward. I did not destroy my mother's house. She used it while moving stolen money. I did not ruin Nolan's career. He left his job, stole identities, and treated my financial security as investment capital. I did not strand them overseas. They traveled using funds they had no right to spend. I did not choose money over family. I chose truth over a family arrangement that required my money to flow outward and my pain to remain silent. Money was never the deepest issue. The deepest issue was entitlement. My mother believed raising me created lifelong ownership over whatever I later built. Nolan believed struggling made his needs more legitimate than my boundaries. Relatives believed my success reduced the seriousness of theft. Because I had a career I could recover. Because I owned a home I had enough. Because I was responsible I should prevent consequences. That logic punishes the person who worked hardest to become safe. Self-worth meant rejecting it. A financially stable person is not a family reserve account. A successful daughter is not responsible for purchasing her brother's dignity. A child does not owe unlimited access because a parent made sacrifices required by parenthood. Love may inspire generosity. Love cannot erase consent. The recovery fund taught me something else. Diane and Nolan believed the 12 wildfire families were strangers whose money mattered less than Nolan's future. Yet those strangers had trusted me without knowing my childhood, my mother, or my brother. They trusted a system, and when that system was attacked, co-workers, banks, insurers, and board members acted quickly to protect them. Meanwhile, relatives who had known me my entire life asked whether reporting theft was too harsh. Blood did not determine loyalty. Conduct did. The people who protected me were those willing to see the facts without demanding that I make them emotionally convenient. I used to think forgiveness meant reaching a point where the betrayal no longer mattered. Now I believe forgiveness, when it happens, means the betrayal no longer directs every choice. I forgave Nolan enough to stop hoping he failed. I did not forgive him into my bank account, home, or daily life. I may have forgiven Diane internally, but I did not forgive her into contact. Forgiveness did not become a key. It became permission for me to stop standing at the door. My mother once wrote that money did not make me better than family. She was correct in a way she did not understand. Money did not make me better. Boundaries did not make me better. My career did not make me better. They simply gave me options. The option to report theft. The option to replace locks. The option to decline a false apology. The option to build relationships where generosity remained voluntary. The option to walk away from people who described exploitation as closeness. Power was not the balance in my accounts. Power was finally understanding that I could lose money without losing myself, but I could not keep sacrificing myself and call the arrangement family. So here is the question I would ask anyone listening, because people still disagree, when they learn I allowed my brother a small relationship after years of repayment and honest change, but never reopened contact with my mother. If your own mother and favored brother stole more than $500,000, fled overseas, mocked you for being too broke to fight, accidentally touched money belonging to displaced families, and returned only after their cards froze, but years later gave detailed apologies and respected every permanent boundary, would you allow either of them a place at your Thanksgiving table, or would the photograph from Lisbon be the moment the family door closed forever?